Hello and welcome back to the I Rehab Podcast. My name is Nick Kane, and today we have episode number 2 from Entry to Exit, Careers in Professional Sport. This is a 4-part series that we're working through the different phases and stages of one's career to hopefully provide some of our listeners out there with some guidance throughout your own career. If you missed episode 1, it was around how to get into professional sport with Paula Peralta, Chris Bell and David Clancy. I really enjoyed that chat with that team there, and today we're chatting around career longevity in sport, how to last a long time. What are the traits that you need? What's the mindset? What are some of the things that are really hard? And what are some of the rewards from, working in having a long-term career in professional sport? And who better to speak to than our lineup from today, Maggie Bryant, who's the president of Performance and Health and Wellness at the Clippers, in the LA Clippers in the NBA. Darren Burgess, who's the Director of Performance at Juventus, recently moved to Juventus after being previously in the AFL and English Premier League, and Byron, who's the head physio of the Wallabies, which is the national rugby team in Australia. They were really open with their chat, really enjoyed their insights and come from such a great level of experience to learn from. Now, at the Sports MAP, we just wrapped up our big knee conference for the year with great success, really enjoyed it. Virtual access is coming soon for those who want it, and then we're off to Manchester for our next big event. That'll be on the groin. Less than 25 spots left, and that's June 5th and 6th in Manchester in the UK. A few new events to be announced thereafter, but the other big news is Andrew Wallace RecFem Masterclass is now live. If you're keen to tap in a bit more around the RecFem, the anatomy, how you apply it in your rehab sense from an assessment standpoint into your rehab, when to kick, how much to kick, all the details you need around central injuries to central tendon injuries to more proximal related injuries. This guy is probably one of the most renowned physios in Australia, has worked in AFL, which is a kicking based sport, for a long time. So who better to hear from around the kicking based injury on RecFem? So get over and have a look at that. Now, I did mention it in episode 1, but to celebrate this career series podcast we have going, we do have a fantastic package on offer to set your year up with your CPD to facilitate your own career, and that's $26 Australian off the Masterclass subscription, along with a free clinical self-assessment performer, a professional development planner, 5 bonus lectures from our recent knee conference I just mentioned, and an invite-only access to attend a live career planning Q&A workshop with Dan House from Collaborative Sports, Simon Hall, a physio who has worked in Australia, UK and USA. And if you can't make the live, you can obviously get on demand. So all you need to do to capture that is head to the website, sign up, join us on the Masterclass platform, get all the learnings we have coming, including Andrew Wallace, and get those additional features from that package. All right, well, let's jump into this chat today around career longevity in sport. Big thanks to those experts for joining us on the panel, and thanks again. Welcome to the career edition of the How I Rehab podcast team. We have Darren Burgess, Maggie Bryant and Byron Field here, all very esteemed within the profession and with your careers, and obviously have done many great things over the journey. First question to throw to the floor is, can you share with us a period in time where you potentially doubted yourself in the environment or you were working in, or felt a little bit out of your depth? And Darren, I might throw that one at you to start with.
When don't you? I find at times that I do feel that way. I guess the main time for me was my first experience with the Australian soccer team. It was a team of the sort of golden generation for those Aussies that are listening, and so there was a bunch of really experienced football players: Harry Kewell, Mark Viduka, Tim Cahill, Lucas Neal, all these sort of legends of the game, and I'd been in AFL for the previous sort of 4 or 5 years, and hadn't been in soccer at that level at all. And the first tour that they had was in Melbourne, and when they all arrived, that first sort of week of training, I really did feel like, hang on, am I up for this? Am I good enough to be dealing with these players? Am I? And I reckon it was about the day before the game, so I sort of wasted 5 or 6 days stressing about whether I was good enough, and it just sort of hit me that they're just like other people. amateurs, semi-professional, professional players that I've dealt with in the past. They have the same motivations, the same fears, same anxieties, and yeah, so it was a genuine sort of smack me in the face moment where from then on I thought, okay, well, whether I'm up to it or not is irrelevant. I'm here now, and I've got to treat them the same as the people that I trained with in the past.
Yeah, that's a really nice insight into the importance, I guess, of, just you do get a real sense of imposter syndrome a lot of the time, but obviously dealing with people, they're all the same people. They all have the similar issues. So getting to work with your athlete, that's really good learning. How about yourself, Maggie?
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think, early on, that's extremely common. I remember my first opportunity in professional sports. I had a difficult case. It was a pregame case with a player, and he had some shoulder pain, and it was like pretty black and white shoulder pain, and it was very clear cut case, and all of a sudden I started second guessing, like, oh my gosh, what if, am I the right person for this? Is this right? Am I gonna mess him up if he plays? Is this, and I kind of had to take a step back, like, okay, you've seen this a million times, like, this is just a shoulder, and it's an athlete, and the politics and everything can, obviously are going to add context to the decision, but it shouldn't add, a lack of confidence to you treating what you know how to treat. But it did a lot early on, and there are still times where, you always have imposter syndrome, and but definitely early on in the career, you have some situations where you get questioned or something, and you start to question yourself and if you should be there, and so it's very real, and I would say it's probably in every step of the way.
Yeah, I'm sure people listening who are more junior, to hear that you all would occasionally feel that similar feeling would probably be really reassuring to them, because I think a lot of people carry that a lot, and it's as if Maggie or Darren would ever feel like that. But it's almost nice to hear that we all sort of go through that process and need to sort of self-manage a little bit, working through. And obviously the pressures add to things a lot. So I'm sure working, Byron, in a high pressure situation at times in the Wallabies, and where you guys are like pitch side and need to make really split decisions, impact things a lot. So tell us, what about your experience there?
Yeah, it'd be very, very similar. And it's a great question to open with, because it kind of gets you reflecting on those moments in your career. And I'd be pretty similar to Maggie, I think, in that transition from working with amateur athletes, which is a great grounding, but to working with professionals who, their livelihood is reliant on good advice, decisions that you make with them. I think the huge pressure that comes with that, and you're trying to maintain that calm facade, but below the surface, your legs are going crazy. And I think that for me was the biggest one. There's lots of things within professional sport, as Darren said there. It's like, every day is uncomfortable. You've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. But that first transition from working with amateurs to working purely with professional athletes for me, was probably the biggest shock to the system. But at the same time, I think looking back, why I kind of made it through that, and it was the people around me, and they realised that I was probably 60% ready to move into that job, and they would kind of help me with the 40%. So it was tremendous. I think the only way I got through, because I was so raw and didn't have the polish and know the ecosystem, was the environment that I'd kind of stepped into. And that was probably a big one, is choosing, yes, the job, but also the people that might help you succeed in the job as well.
Yeah, nice. I'm sure that's a good reminder for those who are hiring and things like that, to make sure, there is still that nurturing piece when we are new, and sometimes just going thrown into the mix. There's still lots of development that needs to sort of take place for clinicians when they're there. Great insights to sort of kick us off, to hopefully, get us a bit of a feel on, I guess part of your early journeys and those aspects that you have all experienced. Obviously, we're trying to sort of, working in professional sport looks amazing from the outside. Like, you're working at the Clippers or Juventus and the Wallabies. I'm like, everyone be like, that's like bright lights. It's amazing. But there's lots of sacrifices, I'm sure, along the way that have sort of led you to where you are today. Are you guys happy to share maybe on a couple of those things, that, I guess, personal sacrifices you've sort of made to I guess, have the career you've had to this point?
Well, one of the early ones, so I was never good enough to play sport. Most people in this position are sort of, I was really good, but I got an injury, and then I couldn't play. So I was fascinated with the body, and I went up from there. I tried, but I was just never good enough. So I loved playing soccer with my mates that I grew up with, and just it was that was what I lived for, is the weekend and training with them. And then I got a job, and I was probably 23, 24. Got a job with a local soccer team, just strapping kids' ankles from the under 8s through to under 16s, from 8 in the morning through to 6 p.m. was the under 18 game kicking off, and it was every Saturday. And I had to give up soccer, and there was 21st on a Friday night, and there was parties and weddings, but I had to be there ready at 7 a.m. ready for the first kid, snot-nosed little kid who told me how to strap his ankle and all that sort of stuff. So that was the first sacrifice that I made, and for 3 years, all I heard about from my mates whenever I went out with them, what a great goal and what a great game we played. And throughout, I don't know how long it's been, 25, 26 years, when people say, like, I didn't know on Monday it was a public holiday here in Italy, and everyone's going, it's a great, it's a public holiday. You just don't know that. And people who look at and post a lot on Instagram about how great it is to be, wherever they are, following a team around, you just don't realise the sacrifices, the non-Christmases, the non-public holidays that we've all of us in this room have gone through. So I think it's a really good point to make to people who want to get in the industry. I absolutely love it, and I'm sure we'll get into the good parts about it, but there are a lot of sacrifices that we've all had to make.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. The basketball season right now for us is really September through April, and maybe longer if you make the playoffs. And so pretty much every major holiday, it's you just miss so many moments of family, where your entire family's together, and you're missing, your nieces and nephews growing up and all of that. And it's absolutely, probably the most difficult part of the job is just those sacrifices. And those are the big sacrifices. As Darren said, there's a lot of, smaller ones on like a, day-to-day schedule where, you have friends going out on a weekend and, you don't have a weekend. It's, it's game day or off day, but off day for medical is not really off. So, there are small sacrifices, and then there are definitely some big ones where, again, you have my whole family, brother, sister, kiddos, parents are all going to be together this Christmas, and I won't be able to go. So those are the sacrifices that are pretty challenging to just continue to cope with. But so absolutely a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, Byron, even yourself, you've just mentioned how you were over traveling for 5 weeks, and obviously your family were able to come after that. But I'm sure that's difficult, and also the balance there. You said, it would be almost impossible to try to have your family there and do a good job in work and balance family on the road and things like that. But from your experiences, mate, what can you share?
Yeah, similar themes. You come home and you've been away, and it's like, hey, it would be great to call some people and catch up and do those things. But then the things that got you to where you are, right? So the study or whatever, and you still have got to get into the PhD side of things or whatever it is over there, kind of takes precedence. But I don't think I've made as much sacrifice as my family probably have, not having a dad around or those kind of things. The kids, being there for them at school assemblies and whatever. So I think they're the ones making the sacrifice to me. And it would be for them that, drives me to give 100% when I'm on the ground. It's like, if there's a moment there where I'm not giving absolutely my all with whatever I'm doing when I'm working, then to me, that's probably underdoing their sacrifice by not having me around and being a dad present for them all the time. But also gives you that moment when I get back. It's like I have to be present with them as best as I can. And that's these guys know it's a hard challenge to just completely switch. But it's something that I'd be conscious of, is being in the moment when I'm with them, giving them 100% of my attention and just being present with whatever we're doing at home. So it's that transitioning, I think, is a great lesson. Still learning it, to be honest. It's tough.
Yeah. How do you go about doing that? How do you best sort of switch things off and be present, and especially when maybe, you're on your off day, and Maggie, you said medical doesn't get an off day, someone's calling you about this and that on your off day, and you're like trying to be present, and then you're getting sort of things come in?
Yeah, I mean, the textbook answer would be, you've got all these strategies, and you get home in the car, and then you take your problems, you put them on the hook, then you walk into your house. But it's just not like that. On your good days, when you're in the zone and you've done exercise in the morning for yourself, then you probably handle it really well. But on your bad days, it consumes you, and your kids will be yelling at me something, and I'm completely present at work still. And my wife is a better read of that than what I am. She can see it. She knows if I've had a good day, bad day. But it's probably the strategy would be looking after myself first in terms of exercise, clearing the mind, having those little habits fine tuned, and then that creates a better day, better decision, better being in the moment. I think, Nick.
I think that's a really good point. If I can jump in, that Byron makes, there might be a seemingly selfish aspect of looking after yourself in terms of whatever that is that you need to do. Whether it's, and most of us in this field are, it's probably exercise in some way, shape, or form. But I think there's a couple of things to it, and I'll get on my little soapbox here just for 2 minutes, Nick. You know what I'm like sometimes. We all listen and know about, I don't know, podcasts, and we're on one now, and Huberman and all these people who say, you know, you've got to have your saunas and you've got to do this and that. And some of them are great. Most of them are done by people who have way too much spare time on their hands. But the sacrifice that you make, and I'm sure you do this, Byron, without even knowing what your routine is, in order to get that exercise in to make you a better dad and have better decisions, that's probably at 6 a.m. in the morning when everyone else is asleep, or 5:30 a.m. That's part of the sacrifice as well, because I know certainly that I'm a better husband, father. We're on a work podcast at the moment, but a better director of performance, or whatever your title is, if I've done that exercise. And the only way you can do it is in the morning at 5:36. So that's part of that sacrifice as well. So that then when you can get home, you can put the phone down, be present, tell your work colleagues, don't call me between 6 and 8 while I'm putting the kids to bed, or whatever it is. But I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, it's great to share, and I'm personally the same, right? I would need to exercise, and sometimes I wonder as well, like, this is beyond the scope of the podcast, but where does that sort of come from? I guess I can see where exercise is really beneficial for the mind and things like that, but almost to the point where I'm now relying on it to be good, and I'd like to not be, if you know what I mean. Do you guys ever feel like that as well? It's like, okay, I'm not at my best if I don't exercise, but why? Why can't I be at my best and not exercise for a few days? And so yeah, it's something that I'd like to improve on and maybe just be better at. Being my best self, best person, and present without needing to go and exercise. So anyway, how do you guys find that?
I'm the exact same way, where if I don't get my morning, I'd rather probably be a little sleep deprived and work out and get my mental and physical right before starting the day. And whether it comes sometimes at a sleep deficit or some sacrifice there, I wish I didn't. But for me, that's such a big piece of my mental health, is getting a little bit of time just to focus on myself and the self-care. And but I totally agree. I wish some days I could totally just wake up, not do it, and be able to be 100% functioning. But I struggle with it as well.
Oh, it's interesting. Yeah. Well, it seems to be a consistent theme there around, obviously, you know, people working in sports need to be performing at their very best all the time. So, and obviously working in the scope of exercise, clearly that's an important thing for each of you guys here today. So that's really interesting insight. You know, even speaking to that, we're chatting to some of the sacrifices and the things you guys need to do. Looking back on your career, I guess, have you experienced burnout? Do you feel you've experienced burnout? And I guess if so, how did you go about managing it? And if not, how did you avoid it? So maybe to mix the order, maybe start with yourself, Maggie.
Yeah. I think there are definitely difficult windows, in the professions that we all work in, of you are going to be in a window where you are going to be sleep deprived. You are going to be on your phone a large majority of the day. You are going to be handling and juggling a lot of different battles. And so I've definitely experienced some burnout with it. And I think for me, it's trying to not get too high, too low, and understanding there are going to be those periods. Hopefully those periods are undulated with some down periods as well. But, but again, I think for me, staying true to my self-care, the sleep, the trying to maintain my health are the best ways that I can prevent, or try to prevent it, or again, get some, I guess, reprieve for myself. And then leaning on friends and family during that time as well. It's so hard, especially when friends and family aren't necessarily in it. But, having an outlet of people for me that can just separate myself from the grind, because you can get so just so deep into it, and it's all you think about, it's all you talk about. So also having people that balance you and talk about different things, and bring your attention elsewhere and remind you of the fun aspects of other things. So that to me is, I just try to lean on people during those times, and then again try to focus on my health and understand that these periods are a lot, and they can be really tough and challenging, but you'll get some reprieve and just keep strong until then, I guess is the best way I try to manage it.
Yeah, great. I think, having that social outlet that you mentioned there is both obviously really important, but sometimes also probably difficult, because I'm sure you spend a lot of time within the work setting, and, from in there you start to build, I guess, your social network within that. And, especially you're on the road, and then you'll go out for a dinner or drinks, and it starts to be, you're always with the staff and the team, and that can obviously be then, a fallback to maybe not talking around things other than work. How about yourself there, maybe Byron?
Yeah, I think just to add to the flavours, maybe I think we've all got this bandwidth. Maybe you work a 40, 50-hour week if you're in professional sport and that sort of stuff, and you've probably got bandwidth either side of that. You can go to 60 hours and it's not too much of an effect. But I kind of have found through my career, once it starts to get too much above that, maybe you're committed to a different podcast, or you're committed to a lecture, or for me it was probably COVID. You're doing your normal job, and then on top of that, you're managing a COVID managed site, which comes with being the policeman around social distancing. I'm talking 4 or 5 years ago when I was working in the UK with COVID, and that was probably my moment. It was like I was doing my job plus another X amount on top of that, and it was way too much for way too long. And it was a kind of big plunge after that, to the point where I had to get out of sport. And I'm sure maybe we go there with one of your questions in a little while, but that would be, those indicators were there. Other people could see it, I could feel it, but we had to kind of come through that. But it's that bandwidth, so it was well outside of what you'd normally do for a sustained period, and that was, the indicators were there for me.
Yeah, no different to particularly Maggie's comments around finding those windows, knowing that those windows are going to be, okay, I know this is going to be a tough week, so I just got to make sure that I get through this week by eating well and sleeping as best I can, and whatever I can do. I'm going to go a week without exercise, understand that that's what it's going to be, because it's going to be a big week, but that's okay. Don't check the scales or your Whoop or your Apple Watch or whatever it is that you check to regulate yourself. But I think the other thing, though, that's really important, and it's hard to say this, but don't get too caught up. We're not curing cancer here. We're in sport. So if a coach or a player is putting pressure on you, or and they're feeling like it's really urgent, it doesn't mean that you have to. You can deal with something quickly without the same urgency and the same, and trying to be fairly calm in that process, and be just put it into a bit of perspective. And that's probably something I've only gained in the last maybe 10 years, not even that perhaps. So I think that's important as well, and that allows you to sort of keep, as I think Maggie said earlier, don't have the highs too high and the lows too low. You just keep yourself regulated by, a coach is really anxious about a player, or a player's really anxious about their injury. Treat the player with empathy and respect, but you don't have to take on their stress and their emotion of that moment or that particular instance. So I think that's really important in keeping yourself regulated as well.
That's great insights. Obviously, the perspective thing's like super important, and as you said, maybe for you the last 10 years, and you're really experienced in this field, and I'm sure that comes with a bit of time, and you've seen around, and having worked in the environment, those people who are, like you mentioned there, who can stay calm and regulated throughout moments of stress they're great to be around. They're reassuring for the team, and they bring things back to normality a little bit. And I'm going to throw this to the floor, if I'm more of a junior clinician or someone who hasn't been in the environment like yourself as long, how can I maybe nurture that a little bit more, and what things can I embed in the way I go about things, so I am a little bit more like that?
Yeah, I'll tackle that one. I think it's it'd be just around the advice that I'd give to people that look at professional sport or elite sport, we should say, and want to get into it is just that patience. It's you see the glitz and the glamour of the traveling and the team thing, but there's some really long journeys that these guys have had to get there, and you don't see those bits, and all those little things kind of culminate to a career and hopefully a successful long career in elite sport if that's your pathway. But just being patient and not being in too much of a rush, doing the small things because they all add up. And, it's things like evaluating your values and your purpose. And with whatever you do, it might be an amateur club that you're working with, because those little steps along the way, rather than looking at that outcome of I want to do this, it's those processes that I think would be reasonably common to people that are fortunate enough to end up in the game, because it's a small funnel right at the top. So just doing the little things and enjoying what you're doing and being good where you are, and opportunities come up.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. Thanks, mate. Team, this, I guess, one to also reflect back on, I guess, is there a piece of advice somewhere along your career journey, whether that's an athlete, a mentor, a colleague, that you respected, has really shaped your career, or on a lesser scale, just shaped the way you go about certain things that are still sort of in there today in your practice on a day-to-day?
Mine's a little bit of a different one. I went to watch David Hayes, who's a famous Australian horse racing trainer. I know nothing about horse racing. I couldn't tell you anything about it, but I thought I might learn something by watching him train his horses at 4 a.m. in the morning. And he had a human physiologist working with him. And I won't bore you all with the story of the day, but he did say to me at the end, why do you train humans? Why would you bother? Like, this is perfect physiology, training horses. They don't think. They just want to run. And so and he was predicting the heart rate of a horse at every kilometre increment on a treadmill. And it was fascinating from a physiology point of view. And I remember driving home, it was about a 3-hour drive from where I was living, and thinking, why do I do that? And that changed my perspective on it, because it started getting me fascinated by the fact that, the same athlete is not going to be the same physiological profile from one day to the next, simply because they have a brain and they think, and the brain interferes with the physiology because they've had a stroke, they've had a fight with their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it might be. So it gave me a whole new perspective on what is wrong, or what might be different, not what is wrong, from one day to the next in a player, in a team, in a staff member, in a relative, that we can't control and don't know anything about. So it made me treat athletes far more holistically than just be obsessed with what their sets and reps are on the field or off the field.
That's a really interesting one. And what about yourself, Maggie?
Yeah, I think that's a great response, and a great reminder that you could have the best plan in the world. And I had a colleague one time, it was we were kind of beating ourselves up over a specific case, and it just wasn't like it. There were some interesting dynamics that were going on throughout the case, and as Darren said, like, you don't know what's going on in these athletes, outside of work and everything that's impacting their way that they're functioning. And we all chatted about it, and one of our colleagues just said, we got to give ourselves grace. Like, there are so many factors that go on, and there are so many things that we can do, but there are also so many things that we can't do. We can't force a player to sleep. We can't force a player to have a really healthy relationship at home. We can't force them to not feel the politics and all the stress of the sport and be in the media. Like, there are so many things that these guys have, guys or girls, depending, where everybody works. And so just having grace for ourselves on, the process is, as long as you have a really sound process, give yourself grace on the outcome and continue to, again, be kind of, stuck in the foundation, like be really strong in your foundation. And, but understand there are going to be really, really good days with these players and these people and the outcomes. And there are going to be times where it doesn't work, and we could have done everything that we think is right, and it still may not work. And so just give yourself grace throughout that process, I think, helped me just to kind of take a step back sometimes and recognize that, again, we don't cure cancer. We don't have all the answers at times, and that's okay. But just give ourselves grace throughout the process.
I think it certainly flows into a theme, doesn't it, around going a bit easy on ourselves. It must be an attraction to those that work in elite sport to be driven and want more, want to do better, etc. My advice would be from a good mate Hamish, when we kind of worked together, he said, make sure every game you just take a moment to look around, smell the roses, and I do that to this day. A couple of hundred games in, it's like realizing how fortunate we are to do what we do, working in environments where we're outdoors or indoors in Maggie's case a bit more. But yeah, they're fun environments to be in, and maybe just those moments to live in that, just between the pressure of big crowds and all this kind of stuff around you, but just taking a moment to look up and around and realise how fortunate we are to do the great jobs that we do.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I think we can certainly be hard on ourselves. And Maggie, as you say, I think giving grace, I mean, would it be fair to say that at times each of you could carry, say, if something's not going well, and if there's an injury that's not progressing, that it is hard not to take that weight on, or it might be team performance, or it might be something. Can you maybe share some insights, maybe Darren, who's been around, and you said how it's very important to be measured. Do you still at times carry a bit of that extra burden when you might be home and you're still thinking about it, but you're like, I can't quite shake that? Does that still happen to you?
It probably hasn't happened much in the last few years because of what I spoke about earlier. I've really worked hard on that, and it sounds really easy to say. And I'm sure if I don't know, Tim Ferriss was here, he would say there's all these strategies that you can use, and you'll be fine. It took me years, and it took some pretty ordinary personal circumstances with the death of a family member to put things in a whole bunch of perspective for me. But prior to that, I would carry injuries, particularly soft tissue injuries, with me everywhere I went. Like you couldn't escape it. You'd be out having dinner with partners or friends or whatever, and you'd be thinking about maybe he did his hamstring because of that session where I went 4 minutes too hard the day before. So you would be playing those things in your mind, and it wasn't a healthy way to live, but you absolutely carry those things. And as we've all said on this in the last few minutes or so, give yourself a bit of grace, and as long as you've got good processes, they happen. I remember we had 3 hamstrings in 3 days at Port Adelaide, and all with really top line players. The next day I was up in front of the board, wanted to explain why the hamstring crisis. And I remember the doctor said to me, he said, good luck with it. Just remember, it's 3 hamstrings in a year, not 3 in 3 days. And I went, that's a great point. So that's what I led with the board presentation was, what crisis, 3 hamstrings in 1 year, So I think putting things in perspective is really important.
Yeah, nice. Anything to add there, Byron, from your end?
No, I was just going to ask Darren, would you be conscious, do you think, and maybe it's evolved in your career, would you be conscious of your tone gives permission to people underneath you to carry that tone with them? It's rather than going, hey, if I'm kicking stones about the soft tissue, no one else could possibly move on, because as a leader, they're looking to you for the vibe and how you manage yourself, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Byron, and really relevant at the moment. I'm in a country where I don't speak the language, and there's been some interesting things happening, particularly in the last week, and I could just feel these people looking at me for a reaction, and I was fuming inside with what was going on. But I had to consciously tell myself, just stay calm, just look calm. This is fine. Have a smile. What can you control in this situation? Not much. So just stay calm. So it's a really good point that you bring up, and it's not a skill that I do particularly well, but it's something that I've had to hone a fair bit because it is an important one.
Yeah, great. Team, you guys have all lasted a long time in sport, and we will talk a little bit to, I guess, the point of what else is there if you weren't working in sport soon. But you would have worked with many staff over the journey, some really good ones, and some maybe not so much, or not even if they weren't great. But I guess what is often something that may have cut a staff member, clinician, performance coach, et cetera, time in elite sport short when it wasn't their choosing? What are some of the the traits that may have been there that just didn't allow them to sort of see a really prolonged career? Maggie, let's kick off with you.
Yeah. I think, first and foremost, ego, not being a good teammate, like not playing, quote unquote, nice in the sandbox. I think those are things that we've seen time and time again. And I know, I can imagine we've all seen it, but you can be extremely skilled, but it's really a team sport, and it's a team, of people around the athletes. And the minute someone tries to make it not about a team and not be inclusive and not be, working with each other very well, like that's when I think that, there's so much stress in the sport. There's so much time commitment that if you don't have a really good teammate next to you that is going to have your back, that you can trust, and that's loyal. And I think that those people, their time gets exposed in some capacity. And that's what I've seen is really, really skilled people who have a great relationship with a couple players and may seem like they're doing a great job, may just not be a good teammate, may not work well with each other. And unfortunately, their time, again, they get exposed and their time is cut short because of it. That's the main thing that I've seen, at least.
Yeah, of course. And Byron, what about you? I'm sure that's a similar there's a similar ilk of that would pass through, but that, whether it's you've experienced that as well or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to harp on the message, but I think for your listeners, the being in a rush thing, I think I've seen things unravel, when people jump. And it's an interesting thing these days. There would be I've done my degree in whatever, and I want to work in professional sport. And there's kind of almost an avenue there relatively quickly, as opposed to maybe when we came through, it was, you do some amateur sport and then it gets a little bit further up and then you do high grades, and there's this slow evolution. And that's evolution, right? It takes time and it's slow, and that's why you're making mistakes, and you have to make your mistakes. You just go bang straight in. I just question whether you've had time to make mistakes in a safe environment versus you're in an environment already, and people's careers are on lines, and it's really important that you make the right decisions. And it's the higher up you get, the less bandwidth there is to make those mistakes. And I just think, as a rule, maybe taking things slow and working your way through your career and having good people around you and learning those things. And when that hasn't happened, I've seen it go south the other way. Things have happened too quickly, and it's like, I'm not sure how that's going to end, and rarely does it end well.
Yeah, interesting. And Darren?
Yeah, I think what Byron said rings really true when people are in a rush. And firstly, I'll echo what Maggie said around ego. That's probably the number one sort of enemy in the space. And I remember a guy who I went to university said, fitness coaches won't win you a title, but they can lose you one. We're never the reason why teams win, ever. In the history of sport, we've never been the reasons why they win. And yet there's probably people who think that might be the case, but we can lose by bad decisions, bad people, bad relationships. For sure, we can cause the negative to happen. But that time in the system, I remember when Ange Postecoglou got sacked from one of his clubs early on, I read about him going to South Melbourne under 13s and doing some coaching there just because he loved it and he wanted to experience coaching from all different angles and he said something like, you just learn so much when you coach regularly. I just thought, wow, if he can do that, this world-class football coach, that's amazing demonstration of the fact that time in the system just allows you, either through osmosis subconsciously or consciously, to just take in all these different experiences. So people who are in a rush and want to get there quickly, they're the ones who make mistakes that tend to be a bit more costly because you haven't done that sort of gradation of increasing. I certainly make plenty of mistakes, but I made way more when I was younger and working with amateur teams where the price wasn't as high, respectfully.
Yeah.
I think, Nico, if I could just follow that slightly, it's like, I think a nice message would be it's okay to make mistakes because that's how we learn. It's the skill is trying not to make the same one again. And that shows self-reflection, introspection, the ability to develop. So even now, I'd like to think I was making less, but I'm probably making as many. But it's that learning from those and being able to adapt and adjust going forward, because mistakes are okay. And I think, fostering environments where they're, because we're pushing boundaries, right? So we're trying to push things. that element of risk is what we do, is trying to balance that middle and give people advice on decisions that have got some risk with them, but knowing the balance, the trade-off. We're not going to get it right all the time, but you've got to take your learnings from it.
Yeah, spot on. You're part of this like career series podcast, I guess. We're talking around here, I guess, sustaining a long career or a prolonged career in sports. But one of the episodes was going to be around getting into sport, or how do I get myself into sport. And so I might, just off the back of what we're talking around there, throw a quick one at you, in the sense of, you talk around there that learning, or the pathway, I guess, before you'd hire them, to see that they've maybe done the time and worked their way in. If there was one or two things you would pass on advice-wise to someone looking to get into sport, and if I wanted to come and work at, with the Clippers, with yourself, Maggie, or Juventus, or any of the sports teams with Byron or Darren, what do you guys need to see? Is it that long development? Is there a degree of the learning element that's there, or is it coming purely down to some of their soft skills?
I would say coaching experience. By coaching, I don't mean technical coaching. I just mean I'd want to see that people have been exposed to different situations, and preferably live as it's happening. So coaching a team, whether it's your sister's team or your brother's team, or an under 14s team or something like that, being able to deliver in front of people and speak to a group of people comfortably. There is a certain level of qualifications that you need to have, of course, but I would take that coaching experience. That doesn't mean there's 20 years of it, just that you have done it and you've experienced that, rather than as a sports scientist, all you've done is, not all you've done, your skill set has been developed through sitting in front of a computer without interacting. I would take the person who's probably done less years as a sports scientist, but has done some of those years in a coaching capacity, delivering in some way, shape or form to athletes. So that would be the one piece of advice that I'd give people.
Yeah, beautiful. And how about yourself, Maggie? I think it'd be really interesting as well. Obviously, the US side of things sometimes a little bit differently, but I'm sure some of the soft skills and experiences are all transferable across all the sports. So what's your take?
For sure. I think the soft skills for sure over the hard skills. I mean, you have to obviously have like a basic level of competency to get, in, but I think, have you been in experiences where you've had adversity, where you've had to work within a team? What's the, what are your references, or what are the different intel that we can gather on you that show all the signs that you are interested in working on a team, that you have a hunger to continue to learn, you have a curiosity. You don't think you have all the answers, and again, you've been battle tested in a group of people, and you've done work with people, and not trying to, a lot of people can present a resume where they're the best of something and they've done these skill sets, and as Darren said, you can be in front of a computer and be really, really intelligent, but that's not what's going to carry over and make a successful high performance department. So yeah, it's just it's the soft skills on how well you work together, and in a moment of adversity, how do you handle it? Do you point the finger? Do you take some accountability? Do you show humility? I think that those for us, we do a ton of intel on people when we look into hiring, and we do a ton of intel on interns. It's all the way down to, if we're going to allow someone to come into our space is a sanctuary. We spend way too much time together. It's how are you going to function, and what are you going to bring to the table in this space? So yeah, those are huge for us.
Yeah, same again. It'd be the first who and then what. So getting the people right, and then following that through with that knowledge experts, but making sure that they can fit in the ecosystem that we have. It's got to be able to work together, and it's a complex system, as we know. So you've got to have that, bring that personal dynamic in is probably straight off the bat, and then if they're the right person, they'll be motivated. That motivation is never a thing that we have to worry about too much. That's self-evident pretty much from the out, and then from there we help those people develop into the role of the team member that they need to become within teams.
Yeah, nice. You mentioned curiosity, Maggie. How important is that element for you within the sports setting? I guess you can just maybe look into the lens of someone who's coming in and feels they have all the skills, or someone who is still looking to grow within it and find new answers and push the program forward. Is that something that sort of is that a trait that sits high on the list for you, Darren, or is it as you mentioned, more about the coaching experience?
Certainly, the desire to self-improve, that sounds really bad. The desire to improve your knowledge and your ability in the space that you're in is really important. So curiosity is the word that probably covers it best. I think that's as Byron said, that's a sign of your motivation, and that shouldn't ever be questioned. And that's really easy to detect in people, is that curiosity and that thirst for more knowledge and for more information. Sometimes I used to think that, if a staff member would come in and ask questions, I would see it initially as a bit of a burden. Oh, why did you do that program? Why did you make that decision? But now I see it as an absolute privilege to be able to try and help some people out with either good or bad advice, but just help them out.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question back to Maggie there from that former bit there. What would you, with the people that you see coming through your great organisation at the moment, just that balance between, marginalising knowledge, so looking at the granular small rocks, should we call it, versus the big rocks, and just having the important stuff really important versus trying to know lots about the 1% stuff versus really making sure that people come in know the 95% of stuff?
For sure. I think that's really, really important. And there's a lot of feel factor that people, you either have or don't. And I think that's also a big component of what keeps you around in pro sport is can you look at the big picture? Can you take a step back and are you guys targeting the main thing, and are you continuing to develop as a department in the right way? And instead of becoming so granular and so detail oriented. And so I think it's a really important factor, but I think a lot of that is individual feel of somebody walking into the space, and again, how they function with each other, how they function, within a small part of a team. Like, do they have the fundamentals? Can they provide those fundamentals and use that information around a big picture thing? But I think it's a skill that people have. It's a hard one to teach, I would say.
How do you detect that, Maggie? Like, you said you do a ton of research on people before they come into the organisation. Do you think you can detect that before they come in?
I think asking questions on, again, how do they function I don't think a lot of it is, like, some of it's you just have to I don't think an interview is a great way to detect it, but I think it's more so, really digging into the references on, okay, how does this person function within the team? What is their role within the team? How do they continue to build on that? How do they help the team when adversity hits? How do they function, and kind of what's their outlook? And then the feel of, like, again, if there's issues, what's their take on the issue? How do they maybe how they view it? Because I think that can give you a pretty good insight on to even where their brain and how they view things like problem solving and their ability to do so. But I don't think an interview tells you that. I don't think a resume tells you that. I don't think them answering questions tells you that. I think a lot of it, for us at least, goes to, okay, let's ask people around them. Let's see different environments they've been into and just see how well they've functioned in those environments or how well they haven't. We've had people we've loved in interview processes with amazing resumes, and the minute we call their references, they're off the table because, majority of them are negative or there's some red flags. So, we put a lot of stock into that, and it's still never perfect. But hopefully they have enough experience where, again, they've been around people, they've been through adversity, they've been in challenging situations where they need to communicate to different stakeholders, and then just how they function within that. But yeah, it's a very challenging thing to pick up.
Have to throw a question just at the floor for anyone. Has anyone had an experience where you've gone through all that process, the interview, the references, and you're like, this is a great candidate, and we go and hire them, and then you're like, a few weeks later, you're like, oh, what have I done? Like, this person's just not the right fit. I've completely missed the mark here. Has that happened to you? It's happened to me outside of sport, like in a business setting, and I'm like, what have I done there? Have I completely misread the room? But has it happened in a professional sport to any of you, or seen it happen?
Yeah, it's absolutely happened. Absolutely happened. Yeah, there's a couple of examples that I can think of, and obviously I won't go into too much detail about it. But yeah, where I've made the wrong judgment call, and I've tried to do as much as I could, but obviously I could have and should have done more. But it happens.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Last little one on this. So we're going to start to sort of after this little question, we've got sort of two questions to throw at you to sort of wrap a few things up. But just a quick one, I guess, on this. Partly, I guess, still around the employment space, but also still sustaining a long career. In the day and age now, there's obviously a lot of social media content sharing. Some people have very big online profiles around, being a rehab person or this or that. Coming from a lens of where you all sit, so obviously performance managers to senior physios, can that is that a help to them, or can it be a hindrance? Or obviously there's a play on to both, but where do you see that space being in working in high professional sport and hiring someone with a big profile out there on social media and big on sharing and things like that? Maybe let's start with you, Byron, because your insights.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, firstly, I don't have a big online social presence. I like it, but I'm a bit of a laggard in terms of adoption of it. But I guess the positives are the networking components of it, and I enjoy people reaching out. My advice would be make it personal, not impersonal. I don't tend to respond to things that feel like they're a cut and paste. If they ask me, hey, the Wallabies did great here, or etc., if they can feed a little bit of that in, it's more likely for me to engage, and I try and link. But I mean, I reached out to Darren many moons ago, and he was kind enough to give me some of his time, and I would try now and pay that forward. That's an attitude that I take. It's if people take the time to reach out on socials, I'll try and go back to them, because it's people have helped me in my career, and if that's a small help, then that's great. The negative of it is if you write stuff, it's like the spoken word, you can't take it back. So once it's there, and your views might change in 2 years' time, 5 years' time. Completely. So there'd be an evolution there, and then I guess it's just that connection that gives you an edge and gives you currency. Social media is a tremendous thing like that. It keeps you connected to people and keeps you current.
Yep. How about your experiences, Maggie? And I guess that, I think, Byron, you really added to probably the question there, is in that connection piece to you as senior people and to getting advice and things like that. And so I think maybe we take it that way, rather than I think where I sort of led with it was more around people who have a very large online profile to start with. Is that going to help them get in the job? But yeah, talk to either or. But Maggie, why don't you take it away from here?
Yeah, actually, Byron, I loved your answer. I see it very similar. I don't have a social media platform like following. I don't really do any social media. And that's just because I don't personally put time into it, but I don't necessarily view it as a negative. It just, I think, from a connection standpoint, from a networking and from a knowledge, like there are so many ways to gain knowledge and to pick people's brains and to network within the business and learn from people. I think the downfall maybe would be, it's so funny in pro sport, or in just sport or in social media in general is, when things go well, you're pretty quick to post. And when things don't go well, where are you then? And so it's kind of similar to the don't get too high, don't get too low. Everybody's got the answer on social media to why an injury happens, and without knowing so much context that goes into it. And so I don't partake. I don't really communicate via social media in regards to, again, why an injury occurs or why teams are unhealthy or healthy. Or any of it really. It's just because, again, there's being in it. There's so many things that people don't know that are going to dictate or have a huge impact on the outcome. So, again, I think it can be helpful, as Byron said, from a connection standpoint. I just think it can kind of lead to some false, notions on why things occur, or just try to simplify it too much, like too much of a reductionist view at times. And so I use it for knowledge, and I try to not use it too much as gospel. But
nice. And I think, Darren, you have a few little thoughts there, maybe.
Yeah, no different to what's been said. I think we have an obligation as senior people in the industry to pay it forward a bit. And if people reach out to you, as long as you do make it personal, as these guys said, and don't just say, can I buy you a coffee? And, that's never going to work. But, specific questions. But I do take pride in the fact that if someone reaches out for advice, or I'm more than happy to give it. So I see social media as that, and I don't judge people too much because I don't really pay attention to it. A bit like what Maggie said, people who jump on and they want to increase their profile. Good luck to them, and they might be trying to sell a business, and that might be a way to go about it. So that's fine. If they want to comment on injuries, none of us have got too much time in the day to worry about what someone in a garage in Moonee Ponds has got to say about the hamstring crisis at whatever club. So yeah.
Well, I'm actually in Moonee Ponds right now, so
Is
it's
that
beautiful.
It looked like you're in your garage about 30 seconds ago when the lights went off.
Yeah, when the lights off. Yeah, I'm like, what's going on here? Great insights, and I think clearly for what you guys are really great sharers, and I think certainly from our end, like being a business of sort of, I guess, that intermediate to share content and information, we really appreciate people like you, because the difference you make to the clinicians and is profound. And likewise, when I'm really working in the setting, like I rely on some of that stuff that you guys put out there. Like I'm sure sometimes as a presenter or a person who's sharing information could just like throw it out there and be like, oh, who knows? But a lot of the time that is like really impactful and really changes the way people practice. So yeah, I guess it's great that people that can share your experiences and learning it. And I think, this podcast is part of that as well. So thank you. 2 questions to finish with, team. We're going to bring this in under the 60 minutes as promised. All right. It doesn't need to be 3, but I always sort of work off 3. But what are 3 key traits that are needed to be successful for a prolonged career in sport? So I'll start with Darren. It's okay if it's not 3, but it's a bit of a quick fire round.
I will go with passionate. You really have to love it to have a long career. I'll go with hardworking because there's no escape the hours and the work that you have to do. So you have to be dedicated or hardworking. And I'll say empathetic as a third because you asked for 3. You really have to have empathy for players and staff and people within the environment. I think it's a really important trait.
Yeah, as Darren said, there's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of work that needs to be put in, and that's got to be what you're about. And then humility, and I would say self-awareness, like just being, again, the feel factor of, how do you function? How do you change the way you communicate depending on the stakeholder? How do you, when to push versus when to pull back, and all of those factors, they play a huge role into dealing with these very complicated spaces.
Yep, and then I would roll with maybe at some point having a relatively clear purpose, that 30-second elevator conversation as to how you add value to things. I think it's important to know what you bring to an organisation, and then maybe something like resilient, connected, connected to the people that are going to help you have a long and worthwhile career, or resilient in knowing that you're going to have ups and downs, hopefully more ups than downs. But I think just having those kind of strategies would kind of set you up pretty well.
Yeah, lovely. This last one, I guess, probably leads into our next topic of this career series around transitioning out of sport. And it's an interesting one to how to frame this question to you, because you're all working there and you don't want to be like, oh, I have any thought of leaving, because you're obviously head of organisations. But do you ever think about life after working in professional sport and what that might look like? And do you have, or do you just think you might, this is your career, long-standing, you'll be there forever? And I guess, yeah, I mean, all of you have had some time where you've been out of that professional sport, or well, at least I know Darren and Byron have for different periods. How do you sort of navigate that, and what are your thoughts on this space, and is it something that you think about?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I kind of touched on it earlier, give the other guys a bit of thinking time. So I mentioned COVID before, and then I kind of burnt out and knew that I needed a bit of time away from sport just to make sure I could exist outside it. So I did some other work for 18 months, and then in that time missed it enough to want to get back into it, which is kind of where I am now. But it was nice to be able to know what life's like outside it. We're very, we're on a schedule. I could tell you what I'm doing 3 Tuesdays from now at 4:00 in the afternoon, because we live on a schedule. And I think, thankfully, a lot of athlete wellness post-career stuff is recognising that with athletes now. But it's probably also a thing for a high performance, but also any level of performance to have an understanding around what coping strategies you can set up when you're in it to make sure that you can move into life outside it, because working to a schedule and working away from it, normal life, is a bit of a skill. These guys to know when you get that rare chance to have some annual leave, how many days it takes to actually switch off and shut down. So I think it's real value in being able to compartmentalize, work on your strategies to exist outside of your schedule and your timetable, and try and get better at that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And yeah, you're open to the floor there, Darren and Maggie, if you want to comment or if you have sort of thoughts around any of that space.
Yeah, I think, a phrase we oftentimes use about athletes is their problems greater than their productivity? For me, is the joy greater than the burnout and the stress? It has been to this point. And of course, there are going to be windows where you may say otherwise. But in a global 10,000-foot view, I love what I do. I'm extremely passionate about it. I don't have like short-term goals of leaving it. But at the same time, I think Byron hit it on the head of you're always trying to find, what is the best way that I can continue to grow within the space and hopefully be able to have some transferable skills outside the space when that time does come. You never want to get to a situation where the time comes, whether it's your choice or theirs, and you're not prepared for what that outside world looks like. So, and for whatever opportunities and all of that. So it's in my eyes, I'm constantly trying to think, okay, how do I continue to get better at my role? How do I continue to get better in this organization, in this field? And then again, what transferable skills am I going to continue to grow with communication, with delivering, really intense messaging to different stakeholders and all of those factors. So that's kind of how I view it. But I currently love it and no short-term goal to leave it.
Yeah, that's great. And Darren, you need to finish. This is our last little... Nothing further to add other than, I don't know, I absolutely love it as well. But I know there'll be a time where nobody wants to hear from me or nobody will employ me. That's okay. I'm okay with that. And like Maggie said, I've tried to develop transferable skills outside of it. And it comes down to some of the things that we talked about earlier around why you hire people, a bit of self-awareness and humility and things like that. So we all know in this room that we're not going to be here forever. And so you just have to prepare for that time away and be confident that you're a decent enough chance to take for somebody outside of sport if you need that employment or so it's more about the skills that you develop as a human and as a person rather than necessarily what am I going to do tomorrow if I don't have a schedule or if I don't have a team that wants me. So I think as long as you're conscious of that. But I feel like as much as we said about hard work, and I think people who are listening to this probably, if I can leave you with something, if you're interested at all, think about what Byron said earlier about getting up at 5:30, 6 o'clock to do his exercise so that he could do a full day and then be home with the kids and be present as much as he can. I think about that sort of 12-hour day that he spoke about. That's not easy. So you have to love it. And Maggie just mentioned in her comments that she's really passionate about it. It's really easy to hear that and not actually think about the practicalities of what that looks like every single day. So you do have to love it, and you do have to be prepared to make those sacrifices. And I think if you do that, you'll be okay, and those skills will transfer out to other industry.
Beautiful. What a way to finish and sum up what I think was, an hour of really insightful knowledge and from your experience, and it sort of shows just the way you all talk. It shows why you're at the levels you are. Like, it's not just about a long career in sport. You guys are all at very high levels in managing both a lot of staff and at high level sports clubs, and it sort of comes out in the way you speak and that sort of thing. So clearly some really great learnings for, I'm sure, a lot of people out there, and they'll love this. So yeah, a big thanks for everyone to find the time to jump on to obviously this time to get all the different time zones together is a challenge, but I really appreciate you all jumping on board and looking forward to getting this one out there.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nick. Take care, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the show. Thanks, Nick.